What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review the Fantastic Four First Steps, and I'll start totally spoiler-free, and then I'll give you a verbal warning, as well as a time code below when I go into any plot-specific details, but let's start with big picture. This is the best Marvel production of 2025. It's better than Cap 4, it's better than Daredevil Born Again, it's better than Thunderbolts, and it's definitely better than Ironheart. Whether or not it's better than its distinguished competition, James Gunn's Superman, which came out 2 weeks ago, I don't think so, but I think the race is close enough that there should be a lively debate amongst comic book fans and superhero fans over the next few weeks. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with the premise, here's the synopsis from IMDb. Forced to balance their roles as heroes with the strength of their family bond, the Fantastic Four must defend Earth from a ravenous space god called Galactus and his enigmatic herald, Silver Surfer.
I herald Galactus.
And I should also add that this story is set on a different Earth from the one that is typically featured in all the MCU movies, but not to worry, the team-up is coming in Avengers Doomsday, as they say at the end of the movie. But before I say anything that's either complimentary or critical about this movie, I want to make one observation which I think is more relevant and more important than any opinion I might have about the movie. I went to see Fantastic Four over at the Village East by Angelica, and if you're familiar with New York, there are a couple of good theaters around the city, some of which are very modern, some of which are very old school. The Village East by Angelica, in my opinion, is the best theater in Lower Manhattan. It's old as hell. It's like 100 years old. It's a double-decker theater, and they have a 70mm projector. Not as good as IMAX, but still, 70mm is pretty goddamn good. If you want ambiance and atmosphere, it's a fantastic screening room in Lower Manhattan. Not as technically superior as the IMAX 70mm up at the AMC Lincoln Square up in the Upper West Side. But my point is, this is a really, really nice theater in Lower Manhattan, close to where the ever-loving Blue-Eyed Thing grew up. Famously, he grew up on Yancey Street in the comics, which is a stand-in for Delancey Street here in Lower Manhattan. And New Yorkers fucking love Marvel. It's the home base of all the characters. The Baxter Building's in New York. Spider-Man's in New York. Daredevil's in New York. You know, the Avengers are in New York. Everybody's in New York, and even the X-Men are close by in Westchester. And obviously, Marvel Comics itself was here for many, many decades. And starting in the summer of 2008, when I moved to New York, I've seen every Marvel movie since The Incredible Hulk up to the present day. I'd seen Iron Man previously in North Carolina. But my point is, I've seen the Marvel crowd grow and shrink depending upon the quality of the movies. When I walked into Fantastic Four First Steps, I thought I'd walked into the wrong theater because I was worried because I was walking in right at 2 o'clock. I was like, oh my God, there's probably going to be somebody sitting in my seat. There's going to be a fight, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's such a great theater. There were 6 people in the theater, which just, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is a Marvel movie. This is a big Marvel movie. 6 people are here, and one of whom laughed uproariously the entire movie. But I think that that says all you need to know about the relative size of the Marvel fan base compared to where it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It is not what it once was, and the question now is, can Fantastic Four First Steps reverse that negative trend? Because we have a Spider-Man movie coming out next summer, and obviously Avengers Doomsday, Christmas of 2026, where all the FF, they're going to be back in action, teaming up with the X-Men and the Avengers and so on and so forth. It's going to be absolutely bananas. I think this movie will neither improve nor worsen the condition of the MCU. I think it's gonna buy them some breathing room. It's gonna buy them a little elbow room where they can regroup and get reorganized and try to put their best foot forward with Doomsday. It's not a game changer, and I know a lot of people are saying it's the best Marvel movie since Endgame, which they say for every Marvel movie that comes out. I think the best Marvel movie since Endgame is still Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but probably the most entertaining is Deadpool and Wolverine. I think Deadpool and Wolverine, I mean, that was just like an obvious blockbuster from the very first frame. And people start laughing and clapping and cheering. Deadpool and Wolverine was made for the public. I don't think Fantastic Four First Steps is going to have nearly the positive reception that Deadpool and Wolverine did this same time last year. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm just going to break it down into the good, the bad, and the mediocre, and I'll include time codes for all those categories down below. And I'm going to do my best to try not to zig and zag between multiple topics. I'm going to try to stay organized with this video, but let's just start with my love and affection for the Fantastic Four. I got very, very lucky as a kid to be born at precisely the right time to become a lifelong fan. While my first issue of the Fantastic Four was 221, which had a cover date of August 1980, but came out in May of 1980. 1980. So I wasn't even fucking 4 years old yet when that comic was in my hands. But it excited my curiosity. My dad was a big Marvel fan. My brother was a big Marvel fan, and so naturally I became a big Marvel fan. But I was primed and ready when John Byrne arrived on the scene, and he was writing and drawing Fantastic Four from issue 232 to 295. So for several years, during the most impressionable phase of my childhood, John Byrne was just giving us one legendary arc after another, many of which included and incorporated characters that had been introduced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in their legendary first 100 issue run on the book, which I read as an adult. I mean, I read like a few back issues here and there as a kid, but basically I read John Byrne as a kid, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in my 20s, and then in my 30s I got lucky all over again because Jonathan Hickman got on the book, where in real time, month after month, I was able to follow his stories in Fantastic Four, and then in both Fantastic Four as well as FF, and I think those three eras are the great holy trinity of Fantastic Four stories. And they're so good, and they're so imaginative, and so thrilling, and have so many incredible characters, and so many incredible stories. I've never felt that much of a need for either Fantastic Four animation or live-action movies. When I was a little kid, there was that 1978 Fantastic Four cartoon where, for rights reasons, they couldn't use the Human Torch. So that's when they introduced Herbie, who is in the movie, and then Herbie shortly thereafter would get introduced in the comics. But I wasn't really into the cartoon as a kid. I just loved reading the comics because they were so goddamn good.
They have become the greatest team of superheroes the world has ever known. The new Fantastic Four.
And anytime somebody claims to be a comic book fan, you are well within your rights to demand, show me your long boxes. Here's a picture of my long boxes all neatly tucked away. And here's a shot of one of my bookshelves where I keep most of my trade paperbacks and graphic novels. But I did pull a few trade paperbacks and graphic novels just to show how much I love the Fantastic Four. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, first 10 issues, then the next 10 issues, and then issues 21 to 30, then issues 41 to 50, which brings in the story adapted in this movie, The Coming of Galactus. And then some of the best issues that I've read, 51 to 60. And I don't have the rest in my personal collection, but that's the first 60 issues of FF right there. But then, of course, you've got the John Byrne era, the Trial of Galactus, which begins with a battle royale between the FF, Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man and Daredevil versus Galactus, which goes into this incredible trial and Galactus eating the Skrull homeworld. It was just a glorious time to be alive, and I loved every second of it. And I've got some of those issues captured here in these trade paperbacks. And then you've also got the Walter Simonson era, which wasn't quite as good. And then all the Jonathan Hickman issues I have in single issues in my long boxes. But that's not even including a lot of the best Fantastic Four stories which take place outside of the pages of FF, like Secret Wars, which started coming out when I was in second grade, which is some of the best stuff about Galactus and Doctor Doom and Reed Richards. It's on this original 12-issue arc, as well as in Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars, which came out, I think, in 2015. And I'm praying that the upcoming Secret Wars movie will take the best ingredients from both of these stories and just find a way to turn them into cinematic gold. All the stories have been told. They just have to trust the material as written and do their best to adapt them as faithfully as humanly possible. But the reason I'm showing you all this crap, in part, is just to show off all my cool shit. But it's also to prove that when I offer both praise and or criticism of this movie, it comes from a genuine, sincere, heartfelt place where I love these characters. They've been with me my entire life. I've been reading them for decades. I mean, I have a friggin' Silver Surfer poster with art by John Buscema hanging in my bathroom to the present day. And so if I have a few words to share about the creative decision of having a female Silver Surfer, once again, you'll know that I actually like the character and enjoy reading about the character, as opposed to just reading a summary on some sort of Marvel wiki, which a lot of people are guilty of, where they'll read one or two paragraphs and think, oh, I know all there is to know about Norrin Radd or the Skrull homeworld or Galactus or whatever the case might be. Those are fake fans. If you are a real comic book fan, do your homework, do your own homework, and read some fucking comics. But as promised, I do have a few positive things to say about this movie. So let's start with director Matt Shakman, who comes from the world of TV. He's directed episodes of The Boys, Succession, Game of Thrones, WandaVision, which is how he got into the Marvel Universe. And I'll say that I think he has leveled up with this movie. There actually is a style, a look, an aesthetic. Is it as well developed as you would get from a real visionary like Brad Bird when he made The Incredibles? No. TV and film are just two different mediums. TV is driven by writer-producers, people who basically just need to keep the trains running on time and keep cranking out stories, and they have all the power. And film is primarily, but not exclusively, a medium for visual storytelling. The great visionaries who want to use the movie camera as an instrument of poetry. And I'm not quite ready to declare Matt Shakman as a visionary poet of the cinema, but he's at least trying. There is definitely a retro futuristic look from the 1960s. A lot of cool, interesting technology. I don't necessarily like all the costumes, but they at least tried to give the characters a look that would be kind of specific to that period. So they were trying. Marvel is clearly making much more of an effort with this movie than they did with Thunderbolts or with Cap 4 or with the fucking Marvels or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania or any of the other dreadful Marvel movies that have come out in recent years. And if Matt Shakman wants to stay in the world of movies and leave the world of television behind, I would gladly watch his movies moving forward. But next on the good list would be Galactus. I don't necessarily think they gave him the world's greatest dialogue, because I've read dialogue written by people like Jim Shooter in Secret Wars, and I've read dialogue written by people like John Byrne in the pages of Fantastic Four, and I've read dialogue written by Stan Lee and Jonathan Hickman and a lot of other great writers. And as written by the giant army of screenwriters working on this movie, I would say the word choice by Galactus was okay, but his look and his voice were incredible. Ralph Ineson was brought in to do the voice of Galactus, and he's fantastic. Ralph Ineson is an absolutely marvelous actor. And Galactus looks pretty goddamn good. Like, he looks better when he's very still. Like, when creatures are enormous, it's hard to make them feel big if they move too quickly. If you watch some of the best Godzilla movies over the years, usually he's like, oh, like moving in slow motion, but you have to remember the scale, and the way you can remind people of the scale is having like helicopters flying around them, or in this case, like the Human Torch or the Silver Surfer or whomever. He moved a little bit too quickly when he finally arrives in New York, where it actually makes him feel smaller as opposed to more dangerous. He really should be like, kind of moving in slow motion, but that's a pet peeve. But it's just something I've observed in other movies featuring giant creatures, that you don't want them to move too quickly. Like King Kong, Godzilla x Kong, the creatures move so quickly, you start to think they're just regular sized people. In any case, Galactus at least wasn't a fucking cloud like we saw in Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, but I've not felt compelled to return to Rise of the Silver Surfer since 2007, since I first saw it. So my memories are a little vague. That movie came out 18 years ago. But getting back to this flick, what else did I like? The look of the Thing when he's not in costume is pretty goddamn good.
Hey, what time is it? Say the thing.
That's not really something I say.
They got the eyebrows right, and for whatever reason, previous iterations would always like shave off his eyebrows. Like, dude, he looks fucking weird without the eyebrows. Let him have the big old Jack Kirby style eyebrows that give him so much personality and allow his face to be much more expressive. But I like Thing in the weenie bikini. Like, I've never seen the reason why he needs to wear a full bodysuit, unless it's probably faster and cheaper to animate him digitally if you don't have to do all the rocks as he's moving around, which I'm sure part of, like, when they're doing the conceptual art for the character, like, goddamn, do we really want to animate and draw each individual rock on his body whenever he's in action? But he always looks coolest in just his little weenie bikini bathing suit, running around barefoot, bare-chested, beating the crap out of people. And for the record, Thing never needs to grow a beard under any circumstances. I know that everybody got all excited about the beard in this movie. I thought it looked totally absurd and totally ridiculous. But he did look like the ever-loving, blue-eyed Thing. He didn't necessarily have enough screen time, but we'll get to that in my my mediocre section. And as long as we're staying positive, I did like Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. She probably gives the best performance by anybody in the movie. But the writers and the filmmakers totally fuck up her powers. Invisible Woman, she can turn invisible, and she can create force fields. And depending upon who's writing and drawing the comic, she uses those force fields in increasingly creative ways over time, where like she can look like she's flying by basically creating a bubble that's falling and extending, so it looks like she's flying, but she's not flying. But that's one example from the comics where like, oh, that's kind of a cool way to use your force fields. The writers of this movie seem to think that her force fields basically give her telekinesis, and she does not have telekinesis. That is a power used by Jean Grey. It's like, there's a weird thing going on where every Marvel movie seems to think that whether you're Jean Grey or Scarlet Witch or Sue Storm, they all just kind of wave their hands and kind of blast things and move things around. Sue Storm has a very specific power set and an incredibly powerful power set. Like, imagine if she created a small force field the size of like a BB inside your brain and then expanded it. Like, that's a great example of how she could creatively use her force fields to do all sorts of horrible, nasty things. So, yeah, I'm not trying to cut her off at the knees and say she's not as powerful as she's depicted in the movie, but her powers are powerful in a different way. And if you're into comics, well then, yeah, you got to get the power sets correct. But those technical inaccuracies are obviously not her fault. But Vanessa Kirby does deliver a very, very solid performance. But let's get into some of the mediocre ingredients where I was kind of sort of on board, but also a little bit ambivalent. And let's start with Joseph Quinn and Pedro Pascal, both of whom give us very solid performances. I actually went into this movie expecting to kind of dislike them, and to my surprise, I liked them, but there are creative decisions that were made on their behalf, which kind of limit their appeal, like Joseph Quinn. I don't know why they put those contact lenses on him, and I don't know why they gave him that ridiculous haircut. If you look at Joseph Quinn in real life, that would have been just a more compelling version of Johnny Storm. And also early on, it's almost like somebody took an AI program and said, give us a new Robert Downey Jr. for future generations, because he's trying a little bit too hard to speak in that kind of quippy, high-energy style that Robert Downey Jr. made famous in the early Marvel movies. And I feel like that style of performance is rapidly getting a little out of fashion or just overused, a little bit like the quippy dialogue of Joss Whedon has been used by so many other writers now. You kind of don't even want to hear that style of dialogue anymore, but Joseph Quinn, on the whole, he was fine. They just made him look a little bit weird. It's like, just let Joseph Quinn look like Joseph Quinn or hire a different actor. And with Pedro Pascal, they didn't make him stretch enough. I would say he's more rubbery than stretchy. And I know it's very hard to make a guy look stretchy without looking completely ridiculous and goofy on the big screen. But in the comics, Reed will do things like he'll coil up around somebody like an anaconda and hold them in place. Like, he is strong enough to hold the thing in place when he wraps them all up. And there've been a million encounters over the years where the two of them are having an argument and they get all tangled up, and it's delightful. Here, he can kind of stretch a few feet with his arms and legs, but at one point when Galactus is stretching, I'm sorry, I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but it's like the real Reed Richards would be able to just kind of like ooze between his fingers. Like, it wouldn't even matter. Like, once again, he is Mr. Fantastic, and he knows how to stretch his body in all sorts of interesting, surprising ways. So I admit that it is a creative challenge to do Reed Richards' powers on the screen in a way that's not inviting ridicule, but they didn't quite pull it off. But I guess they did the best they can under the circumstances. But Pedro Pascal, he's not my top choice for Reed Richards, but I can live with him as Reed Richards moving forward. But another mediocre creative decision was the design of Galactus' ship. And admittedly, he's had different ships over the years, because famously in Secret Wars from the mid-1980s, when they're stranded on Battleworld, Galactus is getting hungry. And he's getting so hungry that at one point he wants to fight the Beyonder and try to find a way to get off this damn world. So he absorbs his entire ship into his body to have enough power. And Doctor Doom redirects that energy into him, and that's how Doctor Doom becomes really, really powerful. And it's fucking fantastic. But that design is so unusual and so cool, and the movie did not go with that design. I'm like, all right, dude, if you're going to do the Fantastic Four, lean into the weirdness. Every strange creative decision or unusual villain or unusual design choice that Jack Kirby was cooking up back in the 1960s, just embrace it, because that is the core of what Fantastic Four is all about. And I might get some pushback on this next one, but another source of mediocrity is the score by Michael. Is it Giacchino? Is that how you say his name? In any case, I've been hearing that his theme for the movie for months at this point through the trailer. I've never liked it once. Fantastic Four. Ridiculous. They're reaching for some sort of like soaring operatic high that'll give you chills and heartfelt emotion and all that stuff. And who knows, maybe everybody else is feeling that deep swell of emotion each time they hear that score. I think the score at best is serviceable. It fills in the gaps, but it's not very hummable. I don't know how many people are going to be walking home, or how many kids are going to be walking home humming the Fantastic Four theme song to themselves the way they might with John Williams' score for Superman or something along those lines. And another source of mediocrity for me, in an area where Superman clearly has this movie beat, would be the action. The action's a little bit lackluster. If you've got a character like the fucking Thing, who's a big, strong dude made out of rocks, at some point you need to see him fight something that has actually got arms and legs and that will fight him back. There's a robot that's used by Galactus in the original Stan Lee story called the Punisher, who's hell on wheels. There needed to be a scene where Thing fights the Punisher, and you get to see him briefly kind of interact with Silver Surfer, but mostly it's Human Torch that's interacting with Silver Surfer, whether it's through talking or through fighting or whatever. And we see Thing pulling ships and knocking down buildings and all that stuff, but at a certain point, and apparently that's going to be something that's used in the upcoming Avengers movies, where we will finally get a chance to see the Thing and the Hulk throw down, which is as classic a matchup as you could ask for, right up there with Hulk and Thor. So bring on Thing versus Hulk. But we got a long time to wait for that. I wouldn't have minded seeing Thing just put to better use because, as has been teased in all the various trailers, like when or if or ever will he say it's clobbering time? And when we finally get to that big moment, it was so anticlimactic and so bland and so lame and so ineffectual. It's like, that's it? That's your big moment? That's pathetic. So, yeah, as somebody who, I used to collect the Thing spin-off comic in the 1980s where he had his solo issues. I love the Thing. The Thing's an incredible character. I felt like he was let down in the action department. And Human Torch, probably a little better when it comes to the action. He at least looks cool when he's flying around and carving like fours in the sky and that sort of thing. And my last source of mediocrity would be Fantastic Four history, because at the beginning of the movie we get a very brief summary of some of their exploits and some of their classic villains, whether that's the Wizard or the Mad Thinker or the Puppet Master or the Mole Man, like any of the classic villains apart from Doctor Doom, who obviously is going to be featured front and center in the next two big Avengers movies. But they kind of they just kind of brush over or go through it just a little bit too quickly, and I feel like Mole Man was done better at the very end of Incredibles when that character comes out like, behold the Underdweller, who clearly is based on Mole Man. And there's a shot in the movie that's a direct lift from the original cover of Fantastic Four #1 from, what at this point, how many years ago? More than 60 years ago. So they're at least trying to kind of capture the spirit of those old classic characters, but I just felt like when you're dealing with a laundry list of iconic villains, you could do better than like a 30-second summary, just kind of like capturing all the previous encounters between them and the Fantastic Four. And as far as the bad is concerned, let me be very specific. The decision to use Shala Bal instead of Norrin Rad, that is the bad. Julia Garner is a fine actress. I liked her in Ozark, and I look forward to seeing her in Weapons. I already have my tickets to see her in Weapons in either next week or the week after. In any case, I got no problem with Julia Garner, even if her delivery style for this character is a little bit like Julianne Moore as Maud Lebowski in The Big Lebowski when she's talking about her work being very vaginal.
My art has been commended as being strongly vaginal, which bothers some men. The word itself makes some men uncomfortable. Vagina.
Oh, yeah.
And clearly somebody at Disney felt like the Fantastic Four First Steps needed to be a little bit more vaginal, because it's not a creative decision that is going to dramatically improve the movie. This is a corporate decision, some sort of, you could almost even say a political decision, where they say it's too much of a sausage fest, too many men. You got to swap them out. You got to swap one of them out, and before anybody pushes back, like, how dare you? Like, who cares? Like, why are you making such a big deal out of them changing Silver Surfer into a woman? I would just swap that around and say, well, what if you heard that in the next Batman movie or the next Joker movie that they were going to turn, Harley Quinn into a dude? You'd be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I say the exact same thing about Norrin Rad, who is an absolutely classic, iconic character. And there are a lot of people who claim, Shala Bal, she's been around for 60 years. She's a classic character too. She's in a few panels in the 1960s where you see Norrin Rad basically saying goodbye to his world. And the version of the Silver Surfer that they're going with, and I'm sorry, you have to forgive me for getting a little nerdy here for a second, it comes from an alternative storyline called Earth X, which is an alternate Earth. Basically, it's almost like an apocalyptic vision of what the Marvel Universe might become if the entire world were populated by superheroes and Celestials were coming back to destroy the world. But like in Earth X, like Galactus is now Franklin Richards, the baby in this movie. There's all sorts of crazy shit in there for people who enjoy reading alternative apocalyptic futures for some of their favorite characters. But even here in Earth X, Norrin Rad and Shala Bal are side by side. They fly into battle together. They're not like getting rid of Norrin Rad. They're just adding to Norrin Rad. But let's say we wanted to give the movie and Disney the benefit of the doubt, and we accepted the idea that there needed to be a female Herald of Galactus in this movie for whatever reason. Why not use the insanely popular female Herald of Galactus from the 1980s that we already know and love? Frankie Ray, who originally was kind of a girlfriend for Human Torch before she got selected by Galactus to become his new herald, and she promptly went out and picked the Skrull homeworld for him to eat. She was fucking awesome and hell on wheels and ferocious in combat. I mean, one of the first issues I remember reading with her, she's just flying around space, taking out an entire fleet of Skrull ships, balls to the wall, hell on wheels, great character. People love and adore her, and she stuck around for a very, very long time. If they just wanted to go with a female herald, by all means, like, because Galactus has had many heralds, like Tyrus the Terrible. Like my introduction to Tyrus the Terrible is when Doctor Doom gave him his power back in order to sick him on the Fantastic Four. And one of the earliest issues that I read with the Silver Surfer back in the day was when Silver Surfer and Tyrus, two former heralds, went to war And I'll never forget the look of that panel where Surfer grabs him by the beard before flying off with him to throw him into a building or whatever the case might be. But I love all the Heralds of Galactus. I love Airwalker. I love the Destroyer. I love them all. There's a very cool cast of characters who have worked for Galactus over the years. So bring in Nova, and that way you'll be checking off all your corporate boxes. And I've had a few discussions and or arguments with a few fellow nerds where they'll say, well, who cares? It's an alternative Earth. When they finally get back to the regular Earth, like the regular MCU, they'll introduce the real Norrin Rad. First and foremost, nobody knows that for sure, because it might be 3, 4, 5 years before we even get another Fantastic Four movie. And now that Julia Garner is part of the MCU, of course they're going to bring back the Julia Garner character. But my counter to people who are saying it's not a big deal because it's an alternative Earth, well then how come she's the only thing that got changed? Like if you really want to go with alternative versions of different characters or alternative Fantastic Four lineups, how about the version of the Fantastic Four where Luke Cage joined the team for a while? Like, nobody talks about that, but that is actually canon from the 1970s. Or when Sue Storm was too pregnant and or just had the baby of Franklin for a while, Medusa from the Inhumans, she stepped in. Nobody's screaming for Medusa to be part of the Fantastic Four. And I'll go one step further. There are a lot of weird variations on characters over the years, like when Thor got turned into a frog and he became Frog Thor, Thor Frog, whatever the hell his name was. But anyway, he, as written and drawn by Walt Simonson, the legendary Walt Simonson, there was a version of Thor where he was a giant frog. Nobody's screaming for that. Or the time when Captain America got turned into a werewolf and led his team of feral maniacs. My point is that with every character in comic book history that's been around for a long time, there are a million little kind of variations and subcategories based on that character. But when you're trying to make a big blockbuster hit movie, use the best version of the character. And in every great era of Fantastic Four storytelling, there's an equally great representation of the character of Norrin Rad as Silver Surfer. Legendary classic storylines. Obviously, the original Galactus storyline by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Silver Surfer is featured very prominently, and he has a much more interesting resolution to the conflict in the comics with the Ultimate Nullifier and Silver Surfer being trapped on Earth by Galactus as a punishment for turning against him, because Silver Surfer, he loves to soar the spaceways, he loves being close to the stars, and to be trapped in Earth's atmosphere is like a fate worse than death. Then, of course, you've got the Silver Surfer comic as drawn by John Buscema, which is just fucking astonishing. It's some of the best art from that period. I absolutely love it. But really, my favorite Silver Surfer stories are those written by and drawn by John Byrne in the early, mid-1980s. They're just so goddamn good. But there's some other great ones by like George Perez and Ron Lemon in the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline and that sort of thing. My point is, there are stacks upon stacks of great Silver Surfer comics. The appearance of Shia LaBeouf as Silver Surfer amounts to about 5 total panels in comic book history. So for people who are trying to say it's basically the same thing, just a different character, it's not. Shia LaBeouf is an incredibly obscure character. Silver Surfer, he's an iconic character. And when a corporation like Disney places an obscure character in front of a classic character for the purposes of gender swapping characters, they're putting their ideology before their own business interests and also just the interests of art and entertainment. If you're doing a Fantastic Four story, put your best foot forward with the best versions of all the characters. And going for Shia LaBeouf, they just this is why Disney is constantly turning people against Pixar and turning people against Star Wars, because over the last 5 to 10 years there's just been an avalanche of terrible creative decisions along these lines. And my final point in this lengthy tirade is, I don't know if there's a single girl out there that's going to see this movie because of this gender swapping of Silver Surfer. And I know somebody says, they didn't gender swap, they're using Shia LaBeouf, not Norrin Rad. They didn't gender swap. They fucking gender swapped Silver Surfer. But I don't think girls like to be pandered to. I don't think girls like to be talked down to. I think girls like to be entertained like anybody. And if you make a great Fantastic Four movie, that's the best weapon in your toolkit for making a hit movie. And if the movie's fucking awesome, girls will watch it whether it's a male Silver Surfer or a female Silver Surfer, all they want. Like anybody, it's just a great movie-going experience. And so this is just one of many problems that are plaguing the modern Hollywood. And so when you see superhero movies doing less well, there are a variety of factors, but fucking up classic characters is one of many reasons that a lot of superhero movies are no longer performing as well as they should. But for my last topic, it's neither good, bad, nor mediocre. It's in a wait and see category, and for that, we will have to go into spoilers. So, last warning, 3, 2, 1, all gloves are off. Let's get into some spoilers, including Franklin Richards, a character who's been around for a very long time. I don't know if any character in comic book history has remained a little boy for a longer time than Franklin Richards. It seemed like there were like decades there where he was like, Mommy, Daddy, like walking around like a little 4 or 5-year-old boy. And we've seen a lot of different cool interpretations of Franklin Richards over the years. As I mentioned earlier, in Earth X, in an alternative version, we saw him coming back as Galactus. I really liked him in the Days of Future Past, as written by Chris Claremont and drawn by John Byrne, where we see the X-Men in the future being hunted down by Sentinels, where Franklin Richards, who is a mutant, but he shouts a warning right before the Sentinels kill him then and there. And there was a great storyline, like in the mid-'80s. It was toward the end of Rom's Space Knight, when all the dire wraiths were trying to take over the world. But at one point, Franklin Richards briefly got his powers back because he'd put his own mental blocks in his head to prevent him from being all powerful as a little boy, so he could just enjoy his own childhood. But for a brief shining moment, he gets his powers back, and he just melts Mephisto then and there, and it was fucking awesome. So I've always been a big fan of Franklin. Also, quick side note: Sue Richards gives birth to Franklin in zero gravity. I've seen demonstrations of what happens to liquids in zero gravity. They basically spread in all directions. That scene should have looked like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Doom is teased early in this movie. We see Sue Storm. I think she's addressing the United Nations, or maybe she's just talking to the Future Foundation. But I call it Latveria, but I know Stan Lee always said Latveria. But Dr. Doom is the monarch of Latveria. But we see his seat is empty before some big vote. So it's not like they just added him in after the credits. Of course, they could have added that insert at any time. But in the main kind of mid-credit stinger or teaser for the next movie, we do see Doom, his green cloak with his mask off, but his back is to us, playing with Franklin, who's now 4 years old. And so I am beyond fired up to see how Doom will try to manipulate or exploit Franklin Richards' powers to his benefit. I hope they recast the actor. The little kid, the one close-up we get of him when he's 4, one of his teeth has already turned like completely green and rotten. It's like, dude, find an actor who doesn't have like a rotten mouth from eating too much candy, or send him to the dentist before Avengers Doomsday. But he's just a little kid. They can cast whoever they like moving forward. But I'm excited to see what they might cook up when it comes to Franklin Richards and how he'll be tied into the inevitable creation of Battleworld and Avengers Secret Wars. Because in the comics, the first Battleworld was created by the Beyonder, and then the second Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman, Battleworld was created by Dr. Doom after he had achieved a certain level of omnipotence and omniscience. And I'm assuming that somehow he'll find a way to manipulate Franklin into helping him create that world, as opposed to manipulating like Molecule Man and the Beyonders and a bunch of other factors as written by Jonathan Hickman. Jonathan Hickman's plots are so complex, they're hard to summarize in brief form. But I suspect Molecule Man would not be in the mix, but Franklin Richards will. But long story short, Fantastic Four First Steps was just good enough where I can kind of trick myself into getting excited for both Doomsday as well as Secret Wars. I mean, once again, I like reading comics. As you can see, they're a lot of fun. I basically taught myself to read by reading comics. I can remember when I was a little kid, like comics were basically like hieroglyphics, and I'd be like, Mommy, what's this? Or Daddy, what's this? And I would slowly but surely, the words started to make sense. But I became a lifelong reader thanks to comics. And I kept up my comic book reading and collecting habit for many, many decades. I basically dropped it around like 2015 or 2016. And now I just read books, and I've got no buyer's remorse about primarily focusing on books in my twilight years. But the big nerdy question about Doomsday and Secret Wars, first and foremost, can they be successful? But also, to what degree will they basically try to reboot or reset the Marvel Cinematic Universe, get rid of the multiverse, put everything on one world, basically reinvent the X-Men for future generations, reinvent the Avengers for future generations, obviously hang on to this iteration of the Fantastic Four for a while, but like the core of Marvel, I mean, apart from Spider-Man being the most obvious, most popular character, but like the core teams have always been Avengers, Fantastic Four, and X-Men. Although it did take a long time for X-Men to get really popular, but they've enjoyed enormous success in the movies. I am skeptical, but would love to be wrong, that Kevin Feige can find a way to reinvent the MCU and make it just as popular all over again as it was around like 2018 or 2019. Because I think the main problem with the MCU these days is they refused to hire visionaries. In the early days of Marvel, they would hire some of the best and brightest talent out there, and sometimes they would have to groom them into becoming that. But it seems like these days what Marvel really wants are writers and directors who come from the world of TV, who will take orders and do as they're told and basically try to make the trains run on time, but they'll never invite like a Joss Whedon or a James Gunn back into the mix. And some people are going to say, well, what about the Russo brothers? They gave Marvel some of their best movies. Yes, they did. But goddamn, the Russo brothers have really started to slide in recent years. Did y'all watch The Electric State? Did y'all watch The Gray Man? Did you watch that awful show on Amazon, Citadel? And they've done some just pure diarrhea in recent years. And they've basically gone like running and fleeing back to the open arms of Marvel because they were just total failures outside the world of Marvel. So I am skeptical as to whether or not the Russos still got it, but we will find out in basically 18 months' time. But for now, we will have this Superman versus Fantastic Four debate to entertain us for the next few weeks. I'm going to stick with my original prediction that I made last weekend about box office. I think Superman's going to do much better in the domestic market, and I think Fantastic Four is going to do better in the international market. The box office tracking for Fantastic Four First Steps is a little softer in the domestic market compared to Superman. It's supposed to open somewhere between like 95 and 110 million, which would still make it more successful than the other two Marvel movies released this year. So I think if Marvel can just get this movie to like the 500 million range, they'll be like, whew, we've got some breathing room. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. But just as a way of wrapping up this video, we've seen the Fantastic Four in many iterations of over the years. Like an animation from 1967 and 1968, there was actually a pretty good cartoon. The 1978 cartoon is obviously my first. The 1994 to 96 cartoon has a lot of fans. And there was I think a feature or a news show in 2006. And when it comes to movies, we got the original kind of Roger Corman like movie that wasn't really a real movie, but they thought it was real, so they're making it, from 1994, which is very earnest but very low budget. And then we have the two movies from 05 and 07, which I never think about or talk about or go back and revisit. At some point, I should rewatch those just to see like which ingredients actually have withstood the test of time. And then, of course, we've got Josh Trank's Fanforstic. I mean, it's got that weird title where I was like, who designed that logo for that movie? But that movie has one or two interesting ingredients, but they get Doctor Doom so utterly abysmally wrong that I just I can't have anything to do with that movie. And it was a total bomb. I think it grossed only like 170 million or 180 million total worldwide. And so that movie, 10 years old now, is best left in the dung heap or the ashes of history. But I think when you compare First Steps to all those other live-action movies, this is clearly the best live-action version of Fantastic Four that we have ever seen. But it's no comparison to the comics. And maybe I'm just overly loyal to those comics because I read them at an impressionable age. But I like writers and artists with originality, with bold new ideas, and like brilliant imaginative design. And whether you're talking about the 60s or the 80s or the 20-teens, we've had so many astonishingly good periods for Fantastic Four. It's very tough to make a movie that measures up in a favorable way to those incredible arcs. And my recommendation would just be Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, John Byrne, Jonathan Hickman. You can do no wrong. Read every single Fantastic Four issue that they ever wrote, and you will be gloriously entertained every step of the way. And if you can, make some time for Jim Shooter's Secret Wars, where the Fantastic Four are featured very prominently. But I think that's all I've got to say for now. It's time to edit this bad boy together. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.